Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us again at Right Hive 2023. I'm Patri Jones, your moderator for today's presentation, Using Kickstarter to Raise Funds and Market. I am so lucky to be here with Amy today as they teach us about this amazing crowdfunding resource, and it's something we all definitely want to learn and have as a skill for all of those projects that need to be shared with the world, right? So let me take a moment to introduce you to our wonderful presenter, Amy Maxine Irmen. She's spent her entire life moving back and forth across the Wisconsin-Illinois border. She holds both a BA and an MFA in creative writing and teaches full-time. She is the author of All Falling Things, forthcoming from Scarsdale Publishing. And as you can see there on her screen, Wherever Would I Be is another publishing, and short stories and poems that have found homes in various journals such as Sinister Wisdom, the Copperfield Review, and Glass, a journal of poetry. She writes quiet stories under the genres of women's fiction, low science fiction and fantasy, and murder mysteries. Amy is on the quest to find the best chocolate, the best chai, and the best whiskey. Most impressively from this bio is that she can spit a cherry pit, 39 feet, 11.5 inches. I don't want to short you on that at all. Believes that learning is a lifelong endeavor and refuses to pick between cats and dogs. You're not going to make her. So welcome, Amy. Let me turn the controls over to you so we can learn about Kickstarter whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much for that. I'm still figuring out what you're supposed to do when someone's reading your bio. I just sit here awkwardly, so I appreciate that. So I'm really excited to be here chatting about this experience with Kickstarter with you all. If you had told me a year ago that I would be doing this presentation, or even that I would have completed a Kickstarter campaign, I would not have believed you, partly because I didn't even know there was a publishing community on Kickstarter, and perhaps you were in the same boat as me. And if that's the case, then I'm happy to open up this community for you. So my personal journey with this began when I fell in love with a piece of artwork by Pascal Campion, an artist my writing bestie introduced me to on Instagram. And I remember seeing this piece and thinking, that's Lucy, who is the main character of my book. And I did reach out to him via Instagram at one point about possibly licensing the image, but I never heard back. And he does have about 850,000 followers. So I assume he just didn't get it or saw it and was just like, meh. But a few months later, I was still stuck on that image. I had tried other covers and nothing made my heart skip a beat like the thought of this image on the cover of my book. So my writing group actually encouraged me to try and reach out again. And I did manage to find an email for one of his representatives, and she did contact him. And it turns out the image was available and she told me the price. Now, totally fair price. He absolutely deserves it. I am all for paying artists what they are worth. I just wasn't sure if I could justify the price for myself. So I sat with it for a little bit, and I was talking to another friend about it, and he said, why don't you raise the money on Kickstarter? And that's sort of what set me off on this path, because again, no clue that this was a thing people even did. So there are, as of this recording, 13,449 open fiction campaigns available on Kickstarter. Again, no idea this was a thing. A lot of other people did. Now, a lot of these projects are high concept, especially the ones that seem to draw the most backers. They have artwork, whether they are comic or graphic novels or not. One in particular, Grim Oak Press, has had 4 really successful campaigns. Their first reached over $100,000, 2 of them reached over $200,000, and 1 reached over $400,000. So they are a well-oiled machine at this point. But they also offer some really incredible options for people to pledge and purchase. Their current project actually reached their goal of $40,000 in 11 minutes. So I do want to say this is not the norm. There are a lot of other projects on there that are simply folks using Kickstarter as another form of marketing, which is essentially the path I took, with the hopes of recuperating some of the costs for the licensing of the cover art. I also opted to run this as a pre-order, so as a chance for folks who wanted the book to potentially have some early access to it. So I'm going to start with the bad news first, in the hopes of helping folks be realistic about their projects. Publishing, which gets grouped in with the category of journalism, so together only makes up about 9% of successful projects and about 4% of the total money pledged. That being said, these two categories have accounted for a total of $178.6 million pledged by more than 2 million individual backers since Kickstarter first opened shop in 2009. The not so fun fact is that 63% of Kickstarter projects fail to reach their funding goals. Now, I knew none of this going into it. I'm really glad I didn't. I found these numbers when I was preparing for this chat. And I will also say, not necessarily doom and gloom, but a couple heads up that there are a couple barriers to creating a Kickstarter account. You do have to provide a bank account for them to deposit the money into. And I also had to provide a credit card in case there were any refunds that had to be made. So you do need those two things, but there's no fee to start up or anything like that. On the bright side, there is a community that is ready and waiting for your book. I pulled this quote from an article in Forbes called "How Kickstarter is Reshaping the Publishing Industry." Margaret Atwell states, "Kickstarter allows writers to go directly to readers and let them choose which books get made, which has resulted in books being published that speak to experiences that often aren't represented in mainstream publishing. The Destroy anthology series is one example of this. It's a series of speculative fiction and fantasy anthologies dedicated to showcasing the work and stories of people of color, LGBT folks, and disabled people. Mainstream publishers might have looked at these projects and declared them too niche or imagined that there wasn't a market for them, but these Kickstarter projects have proved that there definitely is an audience for stories centering people who don't often get to see themselves represented." And I like to liken this to what I call the Netflix effect. You know, we used to have a total of like 5 TV channels. So to be a success, you had to have tens of millions of viewers. And right now, there are so many different channels and streaming services that they can be more niche in their content. And now reaching 1 million viewers can be considered a smash success. And Kickstarter is just one of the many ways to grow a bit of an audience for your book while gathering some financial support for it. One of my friends mid-campaign told me that I set the goal too low. But in all honesty, I set it where I thought I might be able to reach it, or where I could back it the rest of the way myself if I needed to. Because in case you aren't aware, if the goal is not met, you don't get any of the money. So this leads me to my first bit of advice. Be realistic in the number you are asking for. So when you search for projects on Kickstarter, you can specify genre and narrow it by location to have some examples to talk about. And I look specifically at projects in my city so that I could have a couple examples to talk about of some like do's and don'ts when you're considering doing this. One project in particular caught my attention because they set their goal at $10,000 and didn't get a single backer. Now, I did try to find information about the author and came up short. So I dug into their project a little bit, and they had 3 tiers for rewards. The lowest possible pledge was $150 for a signed paperback copy of the book. That was it. So first of all, no one is going to pay that much for a signed paperback for an unknown author. And even well-known authors don't charge that much when they put signed copies up for sale, generally. The next tier they had was $500, and the only difference, the only addition, was your name would be added to the thank you in the book. So for an additional $350, you can be thanked publicly. Again, I would argue every single person that supports your campaign should probably receive an acknowledgement, though you can include a question on your backer survey, as some don't necessarily want that recognition, so you can verify that they do. And then the final tier was $1,000 for a personal copy, a thank you, and for the author to fly and meet you one-on-one to discuss the book and the author's personal experience and beliefs behind the motivation to write the book. Which I'm sorry, but again, I'm not paying $1,000 to meet my favorite author, let alone someone I've never heard of. So again, all of this to say is be realistic. It's not surprising that this project didn't find any backers. $150 for a first tier is going to price out a lot of people. even if they are interested in your book. Something else to be aware of, again, like we said, this is a place where niche audiences are finding books, but that doesn't mean that all niche markets are welcome. For example, another project which set their goal at $8,000 had blatant homophobia and sexism in their description. So I'm also not shocked that they didn't get fully funded, though sadly they did find a few backers. My next piece of advice would be have a reason for the number. So in those last two examples, there didn't seem to be a reason for those numbers, aside from maybe ego, especially in that first one. When you create a Kickstarter campaign, they ask you to write up a story about your project, and this is your chance to let potential readers know who you are. Now, there are campaigns that were fully funded that had pretty sparse stories, but the more successful ones seem to be a bit more robust in their story. Now, this does not mean tell your whole life story. This could be, give us a sense of who you are, how you created this project, and more specifically, why you are doing this Kickstarter, right? People want to know where their money is going. While some may simply pledge because they want a copy of your book, others may want that sense of knowing that they are helping. Now, if you have the ability to do so, consider creating a welcome video or an intro video. Remember everything you learned in your speech classes, right? Dress professionally, don't be chewing gum. Also, you want to consider what is in the frame. We have these lovely backgrounds that are hiding all of the chaos that is behind me. If you don't have one of those, just maybe find a wall to stand in front of. It doesn't need to be a professional video, but it shouldn't be sloppy either. This is also a great opportunity to teach folks how to buy your book on Kickstarter. If you have people in your life that want to support you, but have never used the platform before, it can be a bit confusing. So you could include a bit of a how-to in the welcome video or in a supplemental video. I did also have a couple backers that were like, can I just mail you a check and not bother with that? And I was fine with that. That was completely fine. Now, for my personal goal, I set it at half of the licensing fee of the cover art. And then I did create 2 stretch goals to reach the full fee, and I included that within the story. And this seemed to work well for folks who I know planned to buy a copy anyway. They were willing to spend a few extra bucks to get the book early and to help me have, the cover of my dreams. I will also throw out there, if you're worried that setting it too low means that people won't pledge because they see it's already been funded, if someone wants to buy your book, they're going to pledge, even if they had the goal, if the goal has already been met. As you can see, I managed, that percentage looks really, really great, but I did start out really, really low with that initial. I wanted to make sure that I was going to reach whatever goal that I set. And the last piece of advice, which is going to be the longest piece of advice, is to plan. Take the time to figure out your story and your goal. Workshop it like you might any other writing that you do. Ask your friends or your writing group, if you have one, to take a look and give you some feedback. This is your introduction to potential backers, and you want it to be free from typos, you want it to be interesting, and you want it to be engaging. At the bare minimum, make sure you include the blurb for your book and your bio. I would recommend dressing it up with visuals. This can be the cover art and an author photo. If your work is visual, include a couple examples so that the readers can know what they are pledging for. So you can also run your campaign anywhere from 1 to 60 days. Kickstarter recommends 30. On average, a stat that I found was that successful campaigns on average ran for 39.7 days. So you could probably round that to 40. But however long you decide, make sure you can get your campaign up and ready so that you have some time leading up to drum up interest beforehand. When you post your project, people can preview it and they have the option to follow so that then when it goes live, they'll get notified. So I'll be honest that I did very little in the lead up. I was okay keeping my project a little smaller. I announced it on my social media, so my personal Facebook and then my personal and author Instagram accounts. Your people who will buy your book anyway are going to buy it no matter what, but the goal is to drum up interest for people you don't know. So you can, get the word out there in a number of ways. You can post your campaign and then it's searchable folks looking for your genre will simply stumble upon it. Of the 47 people that backed my campaign, I had 11 people that I did not know. I will also say I was surprised by some of the folks that I do know who purchased a copy that I wasn't expecting to. So you never know who might be interested in reading your work. So just get the word out however you can. The next thing you'll want to think about planning are the rewards, the reward tiers, the add-ons, and then the stretch goals. So your reward tiers are the initial touch point of a backer. They can be single items or you can create bundles. The point is that the higher the price, the bigger the reward. I recommend keeping the reward tiers simple just for your own sake. If you are publishing a novel, then ebook and then paperback or hardcover are your best options. Though a couple notes that I've learned along the way. If you are offering ebook as an option, make it clear what platforms you can offer redemption codes or links for. I stipulated 2, and then after the campaign was over, I had someone ask for a PDF because they didn't want to download another app on their devices, which I get, but at the same time, as writers, I'm sure you can understand being hesitant about sending someone I don't know a PDF of my manuscripts. You can also set limits for some of the tiers. So you can have an early bird tier to encourage people to pledge early. You can limit it to a certain number of backers as well. So using that scarcity tactic, right? There's only 5. I want to be one of the 5. It can be a powerful way to get people interested. If you do decide to offer other physical items in bundles within the tiers, avoid adding really pricey items in the lower bundles. Otherwise, you're going to eat up your profits, possibly more. So make sure the price of your bundle at a minimum should break even with the cost that it's going to take to produce and fulfill those pledges. Another fun little thing that I learned is that KDP/Amazon won't let you gift an ebook to someone in another country. So be aware of that. Whatever print on demand company you'll be using, wherever you're putting up your ebook, make sure you research what your options are. So if you run this as an opportunity to get the book early, also be aware, something that I did not know going in, KDP won't allow pre-order for printed books. So if you use them as your print on demand, you won't be able to order author copies until the book officially launches for sale. I don't understand any of the reasons why they're doing that. It was not fun to discover. So hopefully that will save you some headaches down the line. The next thing you'll want to think about are your add-ons. So you have your tiers, which is the initial, the pick whichever tier, and then you can have these other things that they can add on that will help to hopefully up the price of the money that you're going to make. If your book doesn't have concept art, there are still things that you can add on. I will say that folks seemed a lot more interested in intangible items. As you can see on the screen here, I had bookmarks and journals, and a few people did go for those. One of my stretch goals was opening a set of photos that are present in the book. These are photos that I took while in Scotland that ended up in the story. Again, it's hard to know, it's hard to guess what people are going to like, but from my own experience, they really liked the things that were more intangible, and I'll get to those in a second. If the cover is your own, then the world is your oyster for what you might do with it. If you are licensing artwork, make sure you are clear about what you can and cannot do with it. Some artists will say covers only. Others might allow you to create promotional material like bookmarks and prints and things like that, which you could then sign and ship as an add-on. And I was really lucky that the artist was okay with me doing that with the cover arts. So the thing that surprised, one of the things that surprised me most were how many people went for the intangible item of name a character after me in your next book, especially because I told them my next book is a murder mystery. And I have to say, I was shocked by how many folks took me up on it. There are so many of my friends totally okay with me just offing them on paper. So I'm looking forward to that. Though there's a couple people I had to write them back, like my childhood librarian. I'm like, I can't kill you on paper. I need to find another role for you. I also spent a lot of time digging around some of the campaigns that are out there, and there's some really interesting stuff. I saw one where a number of their tiers did include the name a character add-on, and then the highest tier for that also granted a guarantee that you would survive the book. So that might be something someone might be willing to spend a few more bucks on. Another had creative add-ons that included a personalized one-page thank you note from the favorite character in the book, as well as some personalized sketches. So if you are a visual artist as well, you could maybe create some of those sorts of things. One had taken the artwork from their book and stripped them of color. And then, so just the black outlines were left, and they created a coloring book, which coloring is big these days. Again, if you've got that kind of artwork, it's an easy thing to create. But overall, the notion of limited edition or one-of-a-kind items seem to be key in people wanting to add these things on to their pledges. And then the last one of those three are the stretch goals. Now, these are not part of the official Kickstarter platform. This is something you might consider having in your story. So stretch goals can encourage people to donate more because they want to reach the next specific item. So a stretch item might be opening an additional add-on, or even offering a hardcover option if you didn't already. One of my stretch goals was opening an add-on that would allow someone to name and create a pet for the main character of the next book. And when we reached this stretch, I put in an update when I would open the add-on, and I had someone that I found out afterwards had like set their alarm because they wanted to make sure they could nab that one. Another stretch, there's a fairy tale that exists in this book that was written by the main character, and I was going to create a physical illustrated copy of the story. I was not sad that we did not end up needing that. It would have been fun and I might still do it, but in the time crunch, because again, we want to make sure you can fulfill all these things, I was not sad that we didn't need that. I had toyed with the idea of including a hardcover version as a stretch goal add-on, but ultimately changed my mind. I was worried it would be too much to create, but it turns out it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. It just took forever to print and ship. So that is something to think about for a tier. For a stretch goal, you could create the add-on that is the price difference between what a paperback is and then the hardcover upgrade, so that people can add that if they prefer that. Again, I wasn't expecting the response that I got, so I only had 2 stretch goals prepared, which sent me scrambling to try to find other things. So I will say, plan maybe double the stretch goals that you think you might need. You don't have to reveal them all. You can add them as the total grows. Just have something at ready in case you do need it. And again, make them feasible, because remember, you will have to follow through with these things. So you don't want to put something out there and then be like, I didn't think we'd actually get that far. Sorry, I'm not going to do it. You can't do that. You will also want to find a realistic balance, because again, you are responsible for getting copies of your book and whatever else you add on and mailing them to your backer. So in those instances, when you're thinking of add-ons and stretch goals, bigger isn't always better, right? That's gonna come out in your shipping. The next thing you'll want to think about planning out as much as you can in advance are updates. So especially if your campaign is going to be long, if you're going for this full 60 days, even if it's 30 days, but be prepared for a couple things like sending out a thank you when you do reach your funding, but also consider things like an excerpt from your book or a playlist that you've curated. I've seen folks that will post playlists that they listened to while they wrote, or you could even curate a soundtrack to coincide with your novel. Just something that will keep your backers coming back to the page and perhaps catching the attention of other potential backers. After the campaign is finished, if you do meet the goal, you will want to continue to give updates as you get things ready. So again, you can potentially write some of these in advance and then post them as you need them. You also want to have a plan for when you will get the rewards into your backers' hands, and consider any risks that might exist that will prevent you from completing the project on time or at all. And this is actually something Kickstarter will require from you upfront as you create your story. I do recommend, highly recommend, having the book completely finished and ready to print before you launch, so that if you do run into any hurdles like discovering KDP does not allow you to put up for pre-ordered or author copies, you don't have to scramble quite so much. You do have to list a date for when you plan to have the book finished and in their hands. If it's too far out, folks may not want to risk pledging. Also, if you can't give your backers what they paid for, you do have to return that money. So if you have it done and ready, that eliminates a lot of the risks that you might come across. If you are crowdfunding for the purpose of paying an editor, this is a little bit frowned upon. It seems like within the Kickstarter community, they want to say that the product's almost done, but self-publishing is expensive, and if you want a good editor, you're going to have to pay for it. But you, again, just make sure you have a solid timeline for when you will receive the book from your editor and for making needed revisions and edits. You don't want several years to lag between when you launch and when you launch the campaign and when you will have the book in their hands. If they can see the timeline, though, they might be willing to wait a little bit longer. Also, something to keep in mind, it will take 14 calendar days to get your money from Kickstarter. So if you're banking on paying the editor straight from those funds, make sure you take those 2 weeks into account. Generally, they want half the payment when you sign with them, and then they'll take the other half when they return the book. The last note I have for planning is to plan out your backer surveys. So once the campaign is finished, you can send out surveys that will gather information that you will need in order to fulfill these pledges. And I say to plan this out because you can only send them once. So if you miss a question, then you have to go and try and track everyone down. Now, backer surveys are specific to tiers that people purchase. So it's really easy if you can try to anticipate every question that you might need from them to get that done ahead of time. Now, for anything that has a tangible item, so a printed book or an add-on like a bookmark or print, obviously you're going to want to ask for a mailing address. Also, for books, ask them how they would like the book to be personalized. Some folks, I found a couple of them, the book that I did this for is an upper YA, and there were a couple of folks that bought it for their kid or for someone else that they know. So they might be buying it as a gift, so you don't want to assume that you're making it out to them. Also, they may prefer a shortened version of their name. So they may have their full name on their Kickstarter, but maybe it says Matthew, but they prefer Matt. This is just a good way to clarify. And also a little quick note, we discovered that if people auto-filled their address, for some reason it auto-filled their email into this question. So maybe include a note that they just watch out for that and double check. I had to go back and be like, I'm pretty sure you don't want this personalized as your email address. So let me know what you would like it as. Also allow folks the option to update their address until you are ready to ship in case they may move. If there is a big lag between the campaign finishing, I would also say include an update, let them know I'm getting ready to start gathering these and to put stuff together to mail. Please verify that your address is correct. For ebooks, make sure you verify the email address that they want their redemption code sent to, so you can include that as a question on the survey. They may have a different email than what shows up on Kickstarter. Also, if they sign up to Kickstarter with their Apple ID, they have the option to hide their email, so you may not even see one. So it might feel redundant, but ask them to do that. And then also, if you are going to offer redemption codes for different platforms, include a question where they identify which platform they want a redemption code for. I wish I had thought to include this. I had to follow up with them via email. And sometimes that then extends, not everyone checks their email every day. So sometimes you may have a week or so before you hear back from someone. I also included, like I said before, a question about whether they wanted to be included in the acknowledgements or not. And I know that might sound strange, but some folks did say that they did not want to be acknowledged in that way, and that's totally fine, and it's a personal choice. But give them that option, just in case. Last, a couple of the stretch goals that I opened up were for some free add-ons. So when we reached a certain amount, I was like, bookmarks all around. Everyone can have a set of bookmarks. So I had questions about whether or not they wanted these. And some folks didn't. So that's great, because there's no sense of paying I had them printed already, but no sense of shipping them just to have them thrown away, which would have been unfortunate. On the lines of planning, you will want to think about your budget. So as you consider price points and your goal, you want to remember printing costs, shipping costs, Kickstarter commission, transaction fees, packaging, and marketing if you go that route, because all of that's going to come out of what you raise within your Kickstarter. If you're uncertain of how to price your book, because I remember going, I don't know. I don't know what I should charge, what people would pay for this. Go to a bookstore, look at similar books that are out in the world already, that are in the same genre and page range. You will then want to calculate your printing costs through whatever print-on-demand choice you will be using, as well as what their chunk of the royalties will be for the ebook, which vary depending on which one you choose. So you can charge list price For the tiers, though, it's common to charge a little bit more because you will be signing printed copies. You can up the price a bit more if you are trying to raise money, such as I did for cover art, but don't go overboard. You don't want to price this to a point where people aren't going to be willing to pay for it. You will also need to price your add-ons. So again, don't go overboard. Like, you know, $20 for 3 bookmarks is a little much, but do consider things like the printing price and the shipping you have to pay to get these items to you before you even send them out to your people. You don't want to go with anything that costs so much that you can't price it in a way that you could earn a few bucks for your campaign, or anything that is going to add a lot to your shipping. Be mindful of that. Shipping is not cheap. Bookmarks are an easy way, since you can get decent ones printed fairly inexpensively and they can ship easily in a book. Intangible items will be your best chance to raise money. You know, naming a character after a backer doesn't cost you anything, though I would recommend noting that character names need to be appropriate, because you never know what strangers might request, right? You don't want to be stuck with something that you don't actually want in your book. You will need to figure out shipping, and this is the biggest headache, I think, of the whole process. You can opt to limit where you will send physical copies and add-ons when you set up these rewards. For example, I'm in the US and I did limit to US only for printed items, because when I went shipping a book to Canada, so our neighbors to the north, as an example, started at $30 for just 1 book. I was like, I wasn't willing to deal with that headache. I can't imagine anyone's willing to spend that when they can wait a month and buy it on their Amazon or Barnes & Noble site within their country and just get the copy then. Once you do have a printed proof though, or if you don't, another book with the same parameters, so the same size and about the same number of pages, go to a store and find an envelope that it will fit into. Don't go cheap, because you want the book to make it there in good shape. You don't want it to be all busted and bent. Once you find an envelope, bring both of those as well as any printed add-ons that you might already have to the post office and learn what your options are. If you are in the US and sending a book only, you have the option of what they call media mail, which is cheaper but slower. You do get a tracking number that you can send to your people, but it does take a little while and sometimes doesn't make sense. For example, I sent a book to somewhere, I live in Wisconsin, the book was going about 40 minutes northeast of me, but for some reason was sent to Iowa, Minnesota, and then south of me, and then finally, I'm like, I could have driven it there. It would probably have been less of a hassle. But bring these to the post office, ask them about media mail. For me, it was $3.65 to ship this book, and I found a sturdy envelope for about 86 cents. When there was a set of bookmarks included, the price was $4.35 plus the envelope. As I said before, shipping internationally is not cheap, and it's going to depend on what country it's going to. If you do want the option to ship internationally, again, make sure you go get those estimates and make the prices clear to your backers. They will be prompted. When you include the pricing for the tier, you can break down how much each country will cost to ship, and then that gets added on to their pledge. But also you could put it within the story, because sometimes people get to that and they're like, I'm not paying $30 for shipping, and then they get angry. But if you put it up front, then there's no excuse for not seeing it. But don't guess. Don't guess what these prices might be. You are required to fulfill pledges no matter what, so you might eat into your profits if you guess too low. And if you guess way too high, then your backers are going to feel like you're taking advantage. So along those lines, I offer a tale of warning. What the campaign for a board game offered the backers free shipping if they were willing to pick up the game at a nearby store to them. Commercial shipping is cheaper than residential, but also he was hoping that this would help him build relationships with stores and possibly avoid paying distributors to sell, games he would make in the future. So originally he set his goal at $21,000, and he ended up with 1,612 backers for a total of $73,102, which, yay, until after a series of misfortunate events, including a fiasco with the shipping, fulfilling all of the pledges ended up costing him over $100,000. So he lost quite a bit of money. You can look him up. There's other things, other terrible things that happened to him because of this. So just don't guess. Again, chances are a book is not going to have the same kind of, it's not going to go viral the way that this did. You know, it's a lot less to ship a book and to print a book than it is a game. So just be aware of that, though. Make sure you take the time to research your shipping. If you ultimately decide not to allow shipping, you will still want an option for those folks to get their hands on your book. And again, this is where planning ahead can help you out. If you have your book on pre-order through a print-on-demand company, then you can provide that link as an option within your story. Even if you do international shipping, it can't hurt to include that link in case someone stumbles onto your campaign after it has ended. They will still have a way to buy your book if you're interested. Because there's the thing, Kickstarter never deletes a campaign, whether it succeeds or fails, it is out there forever. So another thing to be aware of, Kickstarter does take 5% of the total raise, just a heads up. There are transaction fees because Kickstarter passes the credit card fees onto you. So there is a 3% of the pledge plus 20 cents per pledge. And then if the pledge is under $10, it becomes 5% and a 5 plus 5 cents. So just a note, if you're thinking of having your ebook priced at $9.99, because sometimes we do that because it sounds so much less than 10, even though it's not. On Kickstarter, you will pay 5 cents more in fees than if you price it at $10. So it's actually better for you in the long run to do the $10 even. So marketing. You can consider running ads, such as on Facebook or Instagram and the Kickstarter newsletter. And I will say, full disclosure, I did not do this. I was okay with keeping my campaign relatively small because it's just me, and it was my first time. I was like, I didn't want to do anything that was going to be overwhelming or that I couldn't fulfill. But there are options to do this. So what I did, like I said before, I planned out 6 months of a lead up. I first announced on my blog and my personal Facebook that I would be self-publishing my second book. And then each month I had a post related to the book. So there was one about Lucy's family. There was another about some of the locations from the book, things like that. The post I did for the 5th month was announcing the Kickstarter. So 1 month before I actually launched. And then month 6 was the post launching the campaign. I was surprised how quickly it funded. It funded in about 4 hours. But again, I went with a really low number to make sure I could get there. And I will say they're not wrong. Most of your pledges are going to come in within those first few days. So if you are looking for a more broad approach, you can run ads, but again, be realistic. Don't spend hundreds of dollars on this because you probably won't see that investment returned. If you do go this route, be sure you target the correct audience. A wider reach is not necessarily better. You don't want to pay for ads for people who have no interest in your genre or your age group. So if you're writing a YA novel, yes, adults read them, but they're less likely than, young adults to read them. So think about that when you're dictating your audience, which you can. Facebook will let you choose your objective, your audience, where to run the ad, and then you can set a budget. So where you set the max of what you are willing to spend each day. So you could say, I'm going to spend up to $10 every day. Facebook will do what it does with the ads. And then once you hit the $10, it stops. So this could be helpful, especially after a couple of days. If the campaign has gone stagnant, this could be a way to at least drive people to the page. And even if they're not interested, maybe they know someone who is. I won't get into too much of it because, again, I didn't do this myself. I just know it is an option. But if you search for Facebook ads, they have directions that will show you how to set all of that up. I would advise make posts on your social media leading up to and then during the campaign. And I say this as like, if you don't have an author account, that's fine. If you don't have a big following, that's fine. Again, most of the people that are gonna do this are gonna be people that you know. The hope is that we'll reach some of the other folks. But if you don't have a large platform, don't worry. Still put these posts out there. Just don't overwhelm them by posting every single day. Once a week is probably fine. But also consider folks that you know that aren't on social media. An email, pick up the phone and call, or text if they prefer texting. Like, just let them know, hey, I'm doing this. If you are interested, here's the link. If not, no worries. If you do have a big platform, this is a great thing to do. One Kickstarter campaign that had access to a large email list had sent out an email blast offering a discount when the campaign launched if they responded with their intent to buy. Because studies show when someone has openly stated intent, they are more likely to follow through. This also gave them, too, a good idea of how many printed copies they would likely need from that. So if you do have an email list, don't be shy about doing it. Just again, don't overwhelm them by sending them every single day. One thing I will say is that it's hard to know what will take off. My favorite example of this, if you've not heard of it, and I would say it sounds a bit cringy, but I promise that it is a heartwarming story. But it's the potato salad Kickstarter. Have you heard of this one before? No, okay. So this guy puts up a campaign for $10 because he wants to make potato salad. He's never made it before. It got funded by 6,911 backers for a total of $55,492. Now, it wasn't just because people were like, oh yeah, I'll give $10 for this guy to make potato salad. He grew the campaign, he added things as it unfolded. And at one point it did catch attention of the news. So then it just sort of exploded from there. But initially he expanded the campaign with things like one of the stretch goals was he would buy a better mayonnaise to use in the recipe. And then at one point he added haikus written in the donor's honor. And then eventually there were t-shirts. And then the next thing that came up was a cookbook. And there is a cookbook called Peace, Love, and Potato Salad. He also, per his final stretch goal, threw a large party in Columbus, Ohio called Potato Stock 2014, for which he did partner with Columbus Foundation, which is supports charities that fight hunger and homelessness. And before the party, outside of the Kickstarter, he raised another $20,000 in donations for that organization. So it does have a heartwarming ending, but you never know what will resonate with people. So if you are considering doing this, take the time, reach out to your friends and family, and try to come up with some creative ideas that can potentially, grab the attention of others, because you never know. You could do a $10 potato salad Kickstarter and raise over $50,000. I do want to point out there are other crowdfunding options, more than what I even have listed here. Kickstarter is not the only one that is out there. GoFundMe, you've probably seen this. Probably popping up on your Facebook. People are asking for money for various things. It tends to be viewed as a platform for like those personal or emergency needs, but there are creative projects on there as well. One of the nice things is you can change your goal at any time. So if you put it really high and they're just sort of trickling them in, you can readjust. But I will say reaching your goal is not required. So that's nice. Like I said, with Kickstarter, if you don't reach your goal, you don't get any of the money. Here, you would still be able to have access to that, to the people who did pledge. There is no fee to create a fundraiser, which I can't remember if I said before. You don't with Kickstarter either. They also have transaction fees, so 2.9% plus 30 cents for each transaction. I will say it's not set up in the same way as Kickstarter, where people can pick tiers and add-ons. So if you go this route, within that story, you'll want to make it really clear what those tiers would be, is how much someone would need to donate to receive an ebook or a paper book or whatever the other add-ons might be. So while the perk is you don't need to make your goal to get the money, the organization for this purpose is a bit lacking compared to Kickstarter. For the way my brain works, it made more sense to have those nice, neat little tiers and things that you can put together. Indiegogo is another crowdfunding source. One perk here is the ability to extend a campaign to continue fundraising without a specific target or deadline. So if you go through your initial campaign, you can leave it up and people can continue to fund through there. They have the same overall and processing fees as Kickstarter. And then Patreon, which is a subscription service, if you're not familiar with it, can help you grow an audience. So this might be not necessarily for a campaign like this, but a chance of, once you do have that audience, to sort of captivate them and then hopefully keep them. And it could be another source of funding for you, especially if you are self-publishing, because again, that's expensive. It's not a cheap endeavor. But you do need to be active with this. So if you are not someone that can create consistent content, whatever that content ends up being, it might not be the best idea. So it's less of a one and done like you would have with a campaign on Kickstarter. So the pricing for this will depend on what tier you sign up for. There's a 5, 8, and 12% tier, and essentially the higher percent that Patreon receives, the more access you have to their amenities. So it's not out of your pocket, it would come out of whatever the pledges are that people are backing you. This percent is in addition to, of course, the processing fees for the credit cards, which are 2.9% plus 30 cents for $3 or more, and then 5% plus 10 cents for payments under $3. So let's say you get a backer who is going to back you at $1 a month. And that may not sound like much, but there are people that are making quite a bit of money. When you get enough people donating $1 a month, it adds up. But if you do the 5%, then you get 62 cents. If you do the 8%, you get 59 cents. And then the 12%, you get 55 cents. And again, I feel this is a better serve for growing an audience than for a campaign. But there are folks that have used it for this sort of thing. So that is my experience with Kickstarter. It was better than I anticipated. You know, when you see the people that start to pledge, and then you meet the fund and you see the folks, especially folks, I hate to say this, but like when someone who I did not know pledged, I was like, okay, it felt very validating, because it's like, of course my friends are gonna be like, I can't wait to read your book, even if it sounds like crap, right? We say these things. But when a stranger does it, it's like there's something, they like the story, they have no idea who I am. So it was a really fun experience. It surpassed every expectation I had, and I would definitely consider doing it again.
Wonderful. You have so many interesting tips and like helpful resources, and so the experience that you're going through is definitely going to be beneficial for those who are self-publishing, who are trying to launch all sorts of different products. So yeah, my touch with Kickstarter was through my daughter, who she follows Epithet Erased, which is like a YouTube show, and she made me watch it, or I watched it with her. But they launched a book, and their story was also probably not of the norm, but their goal was like 33,000, and they raised like $300,000. So they had a serious following for it, with tiers raised, you know, stretching from $5 to like $2,000, where you're getting like a whole bundle of toys and books and signed art and all that stuff. But they had they printed as not a comic book, but you know, middle grade to young adult readers, but they had this niche audience. So that's my experience with Kickstarter. And you're going, it can happen. You, like you're saying, you never know what is on there and what is interesting for people. So it doesn't hurt to at least try it, or keep it in your Rolodex of options.
Yeah. And again, it's all being realistic. So yeah, asking $150 for a signed book is not a good idea, because if people don't know you,
if they don't know you. Yeah. But if they do, they may consider it. So
yeah. On the flip side too, then as readers, I've now gone and looked at other projects that I would consider backing. Like, again, if you're looking for books to read that might be a little more niche market, Kickstarter and GoFundMe and these Indiegogo, like there are books out there that we probably want to read, we just don't know that they exist. So as a reader, you know, consider heading over to Kickstarter and these places.
Look at those things. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Amy. That was very, very insightful. So before we leave this panel, I do want to give you a chance to kind of let us know, for those who are watching and they want to follow you, where can we find you? What's your website? What's your socials? Let me know. We'll drop it into the chat, but give us the spiel. What's coming up next for you?
So you can find me, all of my platforms are by Amy Maxine, and it is AMI, that is not a typo. By Amy Maxine on Instagram and Twitter. And then my website is byamymaxine.com, and that is where my blog is hosted. As for what's coming up next, apparently I'm going to be killing off a lot of my friends on paper for my next manuscript.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you again. We'll go ahead and we'll be closing this event out now. But if anyone who's watching, you have more questions, feel free to go ahead and drop those in the chat lounge, drop them in this discussion, and don't forget to check out all of the other events that are coming up next. Thanks so much, everyone. Take care.